too concerned about are you using the correct one, I would just really try to learn one and get good at it, and then you'll start to really apply these rules properly and correctly as you have more conversations. But in general, el pretérito indefinido, or the preterite past tense, is used when you're talking about an action that happened in the past and was completed in the past. So if I say, ayer fui a la tienda. Ayer fui a la tienda. I'm saying, yesterday I went to the store. Very simple, right? So that fui is actually the past tense of the verb ir, to go. Now, let's say I was talking about maybe when I was, during quarantine, or maybe last summer, or maybe when I was in school. Maybe it was a time period that has passed. And I'm saying I used to go to the store every day. In that case, it really wouldn't sound natural to say fui a la tienda todos los días, because that just is not grammatically correct in Spanish. This would trigger the use of el imperfecto if I'm talking about something I did more as a habit on a routine basis, with some type of regular occurrence. So instead of yo fui or simplemente fui, I would say yo iba a la tienda todos los días. Why? Because I'm giving a frequency here. This is something I used to do every day. It could also be translated as I used to go to the store every day. But in Spanish, I would just say, yo iba a la tienda todos los días. So that's one rule of thumb just to keep in mind. Like I said, I wouldn't get too concerned about it right now. What I would really focus on is just really getting good at one first. So I'm going to give you 5 steps to master the past tense the smart way without getting overwhelmed. The first thing that I would suggest that you do is keep it simple, right? So just like I said, don't try to learn everything at once. You really want to focus on mastering one at a time. And something you might want to consider, and this is really contrary to the way this is tackled a lot of times in language programs, just because of, well, really, I don't know why. I can't explain the academic way that people do things when it comes to language teaching all the time, because it often is not practical. But I will say it often in courses I'll come across el pretérito first. But I believe that you would find a lot more success if you experiment with starting with el imperfecto. Why? El imperfecto only has a few irregular verbs, whereas el pretérito has many. And it's also just way easier to learn to conjugate for that reason. And there's more specific rules about when you use it, so those are things that you'll be able to grasp. However, just because most people want to learn el pretérito, that's usually what we start with as well, because that's what all the questions come in about. But if you're kind of learning on your own, take a look at el imperfecto before you try to tackle el pretérito, because it's just simpler. And even if you don't master using it, you'll definitely start to hear it in conversation because it has a very distinct sound. Just like when I said yo iba a la tienda todos los días, that that ba sound is in a lot of verbs that are in el imperfecto. So you'll notice it right away because it really does stand out. So pay attention to that the next time you're having a conversation. So one, just keep it simple, right? Learn one at a time and don't try to memorize that whole verb chart. Please don't do that. You will find yourself frustrated and wasting your time. And if you have done that before, you've printed them out, you're like, all right, today, or you have one of those books of like 500 Spanish verbs. All right, today I'm going to learn all the forms of ir. Go. That is not the best way to do it. And if you've tried that before and you're still struggling, then now you know from your own experience. So let's try to keep it simple and just do one verb tense at a time. The second thing I recommend is to learn the most common Spanish verbs first. And you'll want to learn the infinitive form. So for example, in the example I gave earlier, when I used the verb ir, I gave 2 forms. Yo fui and yo iba, right? And actually, ir is probably a bad example because it's an irregular verb. But usually, verbs have patterns, right? So if you know the infinitive form, like ir, comer, beber, salir, andar. Those are all the infinitive form, so the verb that means like to do something. So ir is to go. Comer is to eat. If you learn that form first for the most common verbs, then you'll be much more prepared to learn any verb conjugation because most of them start with that infinitive as the core, and you'll be able to recognize the patterns much more quickly if you know those verbs first. So I'd recommend learning the 20 to 50, I'd say, top verbs in Spanish. You probably already know some of these. And actually, I'm going to share with you the top 10 right now, and you can kind of check to see if those are verbs that you know. So there are two ways to say to be in Spanish. We have estar and ser. Those are some of the two most common Spanish verbs. I'll share with you quickly the other 8, and you might want to write these down and take note of these if they're not ones that you know, and make sure you commit them to memory before you even start trying to learn the verb tenses. You've got to learn the verbs first, okay? So let's do it. Estar, ser, tener, to have, hacer, to do or to make, ir, to go, decir, to say or to tell, poder, to be able to, dar, to give, ver, to see, and saber, to know. So hopefully if you are more of an intermediate learner, you probably already knew all of those. If not, make sure you take note of them. And if you want to get a free download with flashcards and audio for the 25 most common Spanish verbs, and that's a great place to start because it's only 25. You should be able to memorize them pretty quickly before you move on to learning the verb conjugation. Just go to our show notes page and I'll give it to you for free. Go to learnspanishconsalsa.com/131. That's learnspanishconsalsa.com/131. And you'll be able to download absolutely free our flashcard deck of the 25 most common Spanish verbs. And all of our flashcards always come with audio so that you can also hear the correct pronunciation, which is very, very important anytime you're learning new vocabulary in Spanish. So make sure you check that out and learn those verbs. So that's the second step. Learn the most common Spanish verbs and use that as a basis before you move on to trying to master the past tense. Next, you want to learn when to use the past tense through examples. So just like I gave you an example at the top of the episode with the difference between I went to the store yesterday and I went to the store every day, you want to learn examples of how the past tense is used. The reason to approach it this way is if I just give you an explanation of this is how you use the present tense and this is how you use the past tense, then you'll quickly forget about it because it's